Hello and welcome to this unboxing of Warlord Games 2nd edition Black Powder rules. For those of you who are not familiar with Black Powder, it's a set of rules that covers essentially the musket era up through the beginning of World War I. So you're looking at about 16 something all the way up to World War I. This is the 2nd edition of the rule set. On the back, it gives you some nice color pictures. It also includes a painted, finished figure of what is included here for the 2nd edition. There's also a list of the different scenarios that they cover through the times from the earliest of 1705 to 1879. All right. So let's go ahead and let's have a look at it, shall we? Now, this is a 2nd edition, and this 2nd edition included a figure of Master and Commander. So it's a British naval figure, and let's take a quick look at that. And it was packed by Esther H. It's pretty straightforward. I am so used to plastic bases. This is the first time I see it. On the back you got Warlord Games, but this is supposed to be a commemorative. And this is our figure here. The limited edition. Somehow I think this rogue is going to find himself into my Prussian armies, because he certainly can't be fighting for Napoleon Bonaparte. All right. With that outside, let's go ahead and let's take a look at the rest of the book itself. So again, this is a book, if you're familiar with Warlord's books, when it comes down to things like binding and whatnot, it's a pretty good job. You got one of the chosen men here. Very, very colorful. A little thing here from H.G. Wells. Now, if you are not familiar with how the English write their rules, it's done in a way where they'll give you the rules, but they also give you the reasoning behind it. They're a little more nonchalant with it. That would be the best way to describe it. But in here, you have got lots and lots of color photos. You've got an extensive table of contents. Again, Black Powder Chapter 1. Again, pictures. It's not necessarily all Warlords miniatures, but definitely, you know, these are well painted, and pictures from the artist, I believe Peter Dennis is his name. It tells you what it is that you need. It tells you what would an army look like, okay, where you can have multiple brigades. But if you're just starting out, if you had like a brigade of each and a brigade on each side and just start fighting there, do with that. Okay, so as you go through, it explains the unit stats here. If you're familiar with 1st edition Black Powder, it's very, very similar. There's some things that they cleaned up, some confusing aspects that they decided to change a little bit. They have apparently added extra. They've apparently have added extra drawings here, but this also talks time about basing what's a standard unit, size of unit, because for this game, the number of miniatures does not matter. It is what is the length, the front length of the unit that's taking the space. And it gives you an idea about the stamina value, which is kind of important. And then it just shows you the differences here. Regulars versus irregulars, formations, okay, that your units can take. And again, you've got all these miniatures, painted up miniatures to inspire you to do other things. They talk about skirmish order, mixed order, which is a mix of skirmish and line, I believe. Square is when you are being attacked by cavalry. Okay, and again, they show up these little side things. And again, when you're seeing pictures of the actual artifacts that are being used, these are not reproductions. It shows you what a change of formation would look like. Communications for brigade formations as we go on through. Again, each, what does a turn look like? Okay, it talks about command. All right, one of the big changes is that the overall commander can actually go in and do something as opposed to being forgotten. And again, this is different, a little bit different compared to the first one here. So as you can see, they talk about the different kinds of orders that they have. If you're looking at the original Black Powder, which was a really cool book, okay, there's some differences, but it's not that much. Still, though, just pictures alone are very well done. Here, there's clear diagrams, and then they talk about range. And notice they do is visual here, as far as the range of your weapons. Okay, it's meant to be eye-catching. It's meant to be eye candy. Some people don't like the eye candy. They would just rather have text, some diagrams. But because this is colorful, I think it's more appealing perhaps to a wider audience. And again, what works and what doesn't. What can you shoot at? What you do not get to shoot at. Unit size modifier. So there's all these dice modifiers that are involved here. Disorder, for example. What is an enfiladed target? All right. As we go through here, overhead shooting at skirmishers. So like I said, there's been, some minor details here that have changed. But again, you are seeing what works left, right, front, and rear of a unit. Okay. As we go through, what does that look like for skirmishers? So, as you guys can see, it's like every page. Now, some people would say, well, if you got rid of the color pictures, it'd be a shorter book. Right. But part of the hobby for a number of people is being inspired by the pictures. Maybe I can create terrain. Maybe I can go paint some guys like these, or in case, get somebody to do it for you. Break tests and shaken units. Unlike Hail Caesar, where the stamina is 6, for these guys, your basic unit is a stamina of 3. But keep in mind, they're getting shot at, typically, as opposed to close combat with sword and spear and knife and shield and axe. Okay. The advanced rules, which will go into things like howitzers and special formations. Okay. They do talk about machine guns here a little bit, but they're not playing a big role like they would in World War II. They give rules about buildings, fighting in the buildings, fighting around the buildings. And again, then there's the useful rules. Think of it as kind of reminders about what can be, what can be done, what can't be done. Things like that. And then we talk about units as far as if they've been untested or not, because they tried to make it where each unit has its own characteristics. An army has its characteristics. depending whether they are very experienced or they're not very experienced. One of the things that has changed is scenarios. There are more scenarios in here that they tell you where in the world that these scenarios take place. So then here, War of the Spanish Succession in 1705. Armies were a little bit more professional back then. And then the Jacobite Uprising. Again, if you're not familiar with it, I mean, you can always go and look up the information for it. But the fact is, what they did with their scenarios, they've covered more wars, actually. Whereas in the first edition, they gave a potted history, like a quick, brief summary of a lot of these time periods. And honestly, I thought that was really cool. Because if you're not familiar enough with the history, you can get an idea, and it might inspire you to go check out a new period. So anyways, French and Indian War, which ultimately led up to the American Revolution. Okay. And then here, this is the 7 Years' War. Okay. Battle of Bunker Hill. So that's kind of a that's a fun little thing to do. Again, North Point, War of 1812. So they try to cover different wars, and you get a different idea about the kinds of units. Quatre Bras, okay, by Alan and Michael Perry. Those gentlemen are well known in the business because they have their own company. They have their own miniatures company. And they do make fine miniatures, I have to say. They are known for historical. I think historical is their main thing. Although they have done stuff for Games Workshop, for 40K, for example. Nevertheless, though, you get to see these massed figures. That's really what Black Powder is used for, is like for massed fights. But I think a couple of brigades against each other, and you could still have an enjoyment of this. The Eve of Waterloo, or Waterloo, depending which side you are coming from here. But you kind of notice here, they'll give you a map. And this map here, you got a hill mass off to one side, a town on the other, and the rest of it is just flat, just plain flat, which makes sense, because how else are you going to get a bunch of guys in line shooting at each other? And then again, colored pictures throughout, just to get people inspired for it. They talk about the order of battle between the British, the types of units, then it gives you the armament, it gives you the hand-to-hand, the shooting if they have that capability, morale, the stamina, any special rules. Again, same thing for the French. Then you have the Battle of Kernstown, which is in the American Civil War in 1862. So again, you have a variety here. Okay. As we keep going, Battle of Antietam, that was like the bloodiest day in Civil War history. Of all the battles in the Civil War, Antietam was just that bloody that day. The Battle of Dead Man's Creek, this is fighting the Plains Indians, notably the Sioux. Custer was around at this time period. I don't know off the top of my head if he was in that particular fight. So, again, action on the Inevzane, Zululand. This is in 1879. And again, you got pictures to give you some ideas, give you some inspiration. Okay, again, orders of battle. It gives you a map. Notice here they don't give a scale here for the map. This just gives you a rough idea how to set it up. Again, unit information. And then in the back, they give you a quick reference guide. Okay, which again is very, very useful for the players. Last but not least, a very pleasant surprise. For the second edition, these guys included an index which for a number of players, they would find that as a positive thing. That makes it a little bit easier if you have to thumb through the book. All right. I'm looking forward to using these rules. I think that it's not simple. It's not the most complex. It's not the most simple set of rules. But one of the big pluses I find with this, you get yourself a game done in a fairly short period of time. That's one of the things that I liked about Black Powder. That when I've played it, it is fun. And if fun is your main thing, if that's your main goal, and you want a reasonable amount of history involved in it, I think Black Powder is a great way to go when you're looking at the time period, whether it's Napoleonic or American Civil War or 7 Years' War, or you're talking about British fighting the Zulu over there in Africa. This will do it. And with that, yeah, I recommend it. All right, I hope this benefited you guys. And again, Warlord Games, Black Powder, 2nd edition. Vive la France. Take care, and God bless you, and have a good day.